Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Amazing. That's a good way to be. What are you choosing? Are you choosing to let life happen to you? Are you choosing to take control of life? Are you choosing to let life flow through you? Or are you choosing to be life, all that is? About a month ago, Reverend Rush shared with us his lesson. And I generally take notes during service. And what struck me in his lesson was 4 words: victim, victor, vessel, verity. I had to go look up verity. I wasn't quite sure what that meant. But it came down to life is happening to me. If we're victims, then life is happening to us. If we're taking the bull by the horns, then life is happening by us. If we're open to be channels of love, of good, of peace, of God, then life happens through us. And if we follow the example of our way shower, Jesus, life is us. I want to share today something because I believe in the power of threes. Something happens 3 times, it's trying to get your attention. Russ gave his lesson. 2 days later, I'm on a call with one of my coaches, and Russ did victim, victor, vessel, verity. 2 days later, my coach is saying, life can happen to us, life can happen by us, life can happen through us, or life can happen as us. That's 2. I meditate every morning. I do what I call quiet time with coffee. All right? I used to be one of those people, got up, went to work. Somewhere in the course of the morning, I'd go get a cup of coffee, bring it to my desk, and drink it while I work. Or actually, I'd let it get cold while I worked. Then I'd throw it out. So I decided somewhere along the line that I was going to drink my coffee warm. And so now I take my cup of coffee and I bring it to the kitchen table, I bring a notebook, and I meditate, and I do quiet time with coffee. Well, after the first 2, what happens in meditation? I tie the words together, and I start writing, because I just allow myself to write whatever comes to mind. And so I'm going to share what I wrote, because I write daily, I post daily on a private Facebook page what I call today's gift. And today's gifts are whatever gift has come to me through my meditation. I write it out, try to get it to be about a 150-word little essay, and I post it. And so I posted these 4 essays, one each day for 4 days. I'm going to share them with you, then I'm going to share with you the thoughts that have come to me during my meditations over the course of the past month. What have I recognized about these 4 attitudes toward life, or modes of life? Victim. It is not unusual to feel like something bad has been done to you. Women are raped, children are abused, innocent people are wronged, and the weak are taken advantage of by the strong. The victims of these incidents didn't cause them to happen. But if you believe bad things are going to happen to you or others, You are setting yourself up for them to happen and contributing to the collective consciousness that provides the energy that supports them. But you didn't cause them. Becoming aware that your beliefs and actions co-create the world you live in is the first step to changing it. With each individual who changes their belief system, the collective consciousness which creates the world we live in changes. When enough of us believe in a better world, we'll all begin living in one. Do you choose to believe that life happens to you, or that you are a co-creator of the life you desire? Victor. If you are a take the bull by the horns, make it happen kind of person, you have a victor mentality. The things that others see as happening to them are just ordinary aspects of life to you, challenges to overcome. You suck it up, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and keep moving in your planned direction. Come hell or high water, you are going to succeed. Many successful people live life in this mode. Many burn out. They reach a point where they no longer feel it is worth the effort to carry on. The challenges seem to exceed the value of success, or the goals seem to keep moving out of reach. When this happens, victor mentality can easily slip into victim mentality. Constantly struggling on your own is exhausting. Co-creating is much easier than soul-creating. Vessel. Believing that you are a co-creator with everyone and everything that surrounds you, that there is a power greater than you, your individual self, however you choose to label that power, is the essence of vessel mentality. Knowing that this creative energy resides within you and can be channeled through you moves you from life happens to me and life happens by me belief systems to a life happens through me belief system. This is a powerful spiritual awakening. When asked how he was able to perform miraculous healings, the Christian teacher Jesus said, "My Father who lives in me does this work through me." John 14:10. He also said, "Whoever believes in me will also do the works that I am doing." John 14:12. Father and me were the man, Jesus's labels for this power. You can be a vessel for this power if you choose to be. Verity. Discovering. Believing and accepting that you are one with all, with Source, with universal truth, with God, or however you've come to understand and label, is the experience of verity. The definition that I had to look up. Something that is true as a principal belief, idea, or statement. You no longer believe life is something done to you, by you, or through you. You are life. You are an individualized expression of life itself. You are an integral and important part of all that is. Everyone is capable of experiencing this state, known as oneness, bliss, nirvana, and many other names. But few of us are able to live there on a constant basis. There have been a few human examples. Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad. In our lifetime, people like Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa. These are people who reached a level of verity, an understanding of their oneness, and lived it day by day, minute by minute. It can be done. For most of us, touching it is a challenge. Even the briefest touch for a moment will change your life dramatically. Desire, seeking, and the practice of prayer and meditation are paths to experiencing verity. And what do we get when we put these together? Initially, what I heard when Russ gave his sermon was that we want to move from one to the other. We want to move from victim to victor to vessel and achieve verity. But as I've spent the past month meditating on these terms, I discovered that yes, that's true. But we also, throughout our life, go through this cycle, giving us the opportunity to, over and over again, touch on verity. And I'm going to give some examples of that. But first, the last of the 5 pieces that I wrote. Victim, victor, vessel, and verity can be seen as stages in the evolution of man, from infancy to old age, or simple change from physical being to spiritual master, or phases that you rotate through during any interval in life. What happens to an infant is determined more by their guardians than by them. Although if crying gets them changed or fed, they may be victors. As you age, you gain more control of your life and can choose to take what comes or make things happen. At some point you decide that you are out there on your own or that there is something more. If you choose to believe there is something more, something greater than yourself, you can experience it as separate from you or working through you and around you, or that you are an inseparable part of it. I want to take you through different examples. I'm going to start with one that happens in an instant. It takes you through all 4 phases, almost so fast that you don't even realize it. An experience that I'm willing most of us... Is there anyone here who has never driven a car? Is there anyone here who's never avoided an accident? Imagine this. You're driving down the road, everything is fine, the guy in front of you slams on his brakes. You don't want to hit him, so you swerve to the right, and you stop, and you're on the shoulder of the road. Your heart's racing. But as you sit, you calm down. And as you gain your composure, a feeling of peacefulness and relief rides over you. What happened? You were faced with having an accident. You were about to become the victim of circumstances maybe outside of your control. But you took control, you took action, you took the bull by the horns, or the car by the steering wheel, and you moved to the right. You took action. You moved from potential victim to a victor. You avoided the accident. And as you sat on the side of the road, you took a deep breath, and you probably thought, thank you, God. I hope everybody else is all right. You just channeled. You just prayed and brought through healing energy. And as you allowed yourself to relax and your heart rate to slow down, and your breathing to slow down and to breathe deeper, and you felt that peaceful feeling, that relief, you experienced verity. Just for that brief moment, you felt the hands of God around you. You felt one with all. That happens how fast? How quickly did you experience all four of those situations, those attitudes, those modules of life. I want to use my mother, my parents, but predominantly my mother, as a longer lifetime example. My mother and I have always had a close relationship. My mother provided 2 to 4 hours a day of physical therapy from when I was, roughly 16 months old until I was in high school. And when she wasn't providing the therapy, she was taking me to therapy. I was 15 months old. We were out on a beach in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and my father picked me up to take me off the beach and head home, put me on his shoulders, where I rode quite often. Except when he put me on his shoulders, I hollered and screamed. And he wasn't sure why. It was because I was in pain. Within a couple hours, I was running 104-degree temperature. I was rushed to the hospital. I had contracted polio. I'm one of the youngest polio victims in the country. My parents were now told by the doctors, he will never raise his head off the pillow. I was in a room with an iron lung. I was still breathing on my own, but they expected that I would lose the ability to do that. My parents were told to institutionalize me, that I was basically a human vegetable. My parents didn't accept being the victims. They were not going to accept that their child was a vegetable. So they took action. They went in search of a doctor that would give them hope. A doctor who at least had some idea of something to do. And they found Dr. Hines. Dr. Hines was my doctor from when I can remember. Dr. Hines was considered by the others at the time to either be a genius or a quack. They weren't sure which he was. But he believed in heavy-duty physical therapy. And as I grew up, as I started to recover, he taught my parents that I wasn't allowed to say can't. Not allowed. I was only allowed to say, I haven't figured out how yet. Okay, but because my parents went in search, they took action, they took the bull by the horns, they found this doctor. And over the course of a couple of years, I recovered my upper body strength. And I was able to get around on crutches and braces. But it wasn't done without prayer. My parents were very religious people. Strict Catholics. Extremely strict Catholics. My father served as an altar boy throughout his time in the Navy. My brothers were altar boys as soon as they were old enough to be. My sister was a member of the Children of Mary, and I started reading as a lector in the church when I was 14 years old. We believed in prayer. Not necessarily the same system of prayer used here, but they believed. They prayed. So they were bringing that healing energy through their path, but all paths lead. The experience of verity. As I grew up, I was on crutches, and I'd lean my crutches on the table, coffee table. My mother would go crazy if I leaned my crutches on the coffee table because they would dent and scratch the furniture. So I'd leave them laying on the floor in the aisle, and people would trip on them. My mother would say, "Don't leave your crutches in the aisle." My mother had the blessing of having her hips replaced. My mother's turned 89 last month. Right, she had her hips replaced and had to use canes for a while as she was recovering. And I came to visit, went up to Maine, visit my mother, and the canes were leaning on the coffee table. And I said, "Don't leave your canes leaning on the coffee table." So she put them on the floor. And I said, don't leave your canes in the aisle. And we laughed. But later that day, my mother and I sat and talked. And with tears in her eyes, we experienced verity with each other. Because now it wasn't just the intellectual knowledge, it was the emotional, and it was beyond empathy. It was knowing. And whenever we connect with any individual at that level, we are connected with God, because we are all individualized expressions of God. And when we can connect on that level with anyone, we are in a moment of verity. My own life. By the time I was 6 years old, starting grammar school, I could now get around on my crutches. All right, but I got around by putting my crutches 6 to 8 inches in front of me and dragging my legs up behind me, and put the crutches forward and drag up and put the crutches forward. So to get from here to that door could be a 15 or 20 minute project. But my parents were taught that I had to do this. I had to become independent. And over time I learned how to put my crutches in front of me and swing my legs through them. And then put my crutches in front of me and swing. And in time I was doing stairways. I could go up and down stairs as fast as you could, down faster, because I could take 4 to 5 steps at a time by leaning forward. But early in school, I could barely get around. And so I was the easy target of the bullies. I can remember kids coming and grabbing my hat and then standing just out of reach, taunting me until I cried. I was bullied. I was a victim of how these children treated me. But then, I don't know, 8 years old, 9 years old, I was in Cub Scouts. And my brothers were in Cub Scouts. We all did Cub Scout things. But in Cub Scouts, we had to sell candy bars to raise money for the pack. Well, being a good Cub Scout, I took my little box of candy bars and went door to door in my neighborhood, as tough as that was, knocked on doors to sell candy bars. Now, if I was standing there, picture me, 8 years old, on crutches, carrying a little box of candy bars with my Cub Scout suit on, going, "Would you buy a candy bar? Would you say no?" So after I sold the first box, I went home and got another box. And I went home and got another box. Now, lucky my mother was a den mother, so she had lots of boxes. All right. By the end of that time, when it was time to turn in our money, I had sold more candy bars than the rest of the pack combined. I was the victor. I had won. Life goes on. Somewhere along in my life, I found unity. I had been raised a strict Catholic, studied religious philosophy in college, studied with the Jehovah's Witnesses for over a year until they asked me to leave, studied with the Christadelphians. Christadelphians, you have to look this one up, very small sect, fairly fundamental, but they love to discuss where the Bible disagrees. So part of their Sunday service is for you to present where the Bible is in conflict with itself. Because their belief is the Bible's a perfect book. It can't be in conflict with itself. If you think it's in conflict with itself, it's because you're thinking wrong. So let's discuss it and figure out what right thinking is. So what do? You get together, you present the two pieces, then you pray and meditate. and have a discussion and look for how can we interpret these pieces in a way that would work. Since years of metaphysical study with unity, I've thought, gee, it'd be fun to go back to those people with some of these ideas, because they're pretty fundamental. So a metaphysical interpretation would be tough. But it brought me to prayer and meditation and study. One of the greatest things that happened to me in studying with the witnesses is they taught me how to study. And they taught me to not just read pieces of the Bible, but to go study what was the context, what was going on in history at the time. Why was this said the way it was said? Who was being spoken to? If you're looking at Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, there's some conflict until you start recognizing that these people were speaking to different groups. They were speaking to people who had different slants on things, and they were trying to reach people where they were. Because I can't teach you from on high. I can only teach you from where we are. So, for me, I started to open up. I started to take classes and healing classes. I studied with Russ's teacher for 3 years. Studied with her. All about inner focus and how to bring spirit through and heal. Use it as a healing technique. And then every now and then, I'll sit down for quiet time with coffee. And all of a sudden, I'll realize I've written pages that I didn't realize I was writing, and my coffee is ice cold. Or a favorite thing of mine is to go sit somewhere in nature, sit by a pond, just listen to the breeze in the trees, the birds chirping, the little animals scurrying around. That, for me, is a moment of verity. That's the moment when I can lose myself in being part of all. I want to share the story of one more person. And I want to separate this person from the on high that we tend to associate with him, to the person, the man Jesus. Not Jesus the Christ, Jesus the man. Like us, Jesus was born, forced out of a womb where it was nice and warm and comfortable, into a manger, a hay trough, in a barn, with animals that smelled and dropped poop in their stalls. Not exactly a high-born way to come into the world. Who lived the life that we'll touch upon and came to his death. He was whipped, crowned with thorns, forced to drag his cross through the streets, then nailed to it, and to make sure he's dead, pierced with a spear. I don't think he was planning and bringing that upon himself or hoping for that. He was a victim of the political situation of the time because he was a rebel. He went against the grain to teach us love, to teach us to love. So, okay, born in a manger, tragic death. But through his life, he sought connection. He prayed. He meditated. He spent 40 days out in the desert. He faced the temptations that we all face. We all face temptation every day. But he overcame them. He was a victor. And through that process, he was enlightened. And with that enlightenment, he brought to us, he came to us to teach us. And part of that teaching was by example. By example of his healing. And I remind you, when he was healing and when he was asked how could he do that, his response was, "It is not me, it is the Father working through me." And when you study the language of the time, Father, Abba, is spiritual as well as physical. Jesus healed by bringing the power of love through him. And as our greatest example and way shower, Jesus became. He became one with. He was verity to the extreme that a woman suffering from a life of bleeding only had to touch his garment to be healed. Her belief in his being, his becoming the I am, had the power to heal. It had the power to overcome death. It had the power for him to be visibly seen ascending into the heavens. That's the greatest example of verity that I know. But through all of this, it's choices. Life happens to you if you choose to believe it does. Life happens by you if you choose to believe it does. Life happens through you if you choose to believe it does. And life happens as you if you choose to believe it does. What do you choose? To be the victim? To be the victor? To be the vessel? Or to be verity? You choose. Amen.